Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about my extended minimalist wilderness camping supply list. My hope this summer is to go into the woods for a week, two, maybe three, see how long I can last with just the items on the table here behind me. So when I think about the items, basically I have three criteria. Number one, is it something that I can get on site? So for example, I wouldn't bring fuel because I can get wood. Use wood for fuel on site. I don't plan to bring tent poles or tent stakes because I can make those out of things on site. Second criterion is how big is it, and the third criterion is how much space does it take up, or rather how useful is it? How big is it and how useful is it? So if it takes up very little space and it's very useful, then obviously it's going with me. If it takes up a lot of space and it's not very useful, it's not on the table here. If it takes up a lot of space but it's very useful, yeah, it might come. Likewise, if it doesn't take up a lot of space, even if it's not all that useful, I may bring it. So let's sort of go through these items. First I'll talk about lodging and sleeping. I don't have a sleeping bag here, but I do have this sheet that's sewn into the shape of sort of a mummy shape. So if I would be in a debris shelter, that would really be what would be around me to keep the leaves and the dirt off me. This is a fleece sleeping bag. Well, not a sleeping bag, a piece of fleece it's about 2 feet wide, and it would go from about my knees to my shoulders. It's a little extra something. It takes up a lot of space, but fortunately it's lightweight. I do plan to bring a tent. This is one of those old-fashioned triangular pup tents. Again, no tent poles. I can make them when I get there. I would be intending to build a teepee, a wickiup type, not a teepee, but a wickiup or a wigwam. That's the term I'm looking for. Once I get my wigwam set up, this could actually become extra bulk to sleep on. It could sort of be wrapped around me, sort of like a blanket. By the way, I'm also bringing a rag here. Anybody who's done any camping knows how important it is to have some sort of a rag or a towel, and what a bummer it is if you don't have one. You know, I do have one of these sparky things, one of these ferro rods. You know, people in bushcraft videos always have these things. They're great, they make a lot of sparks, but I'm not bringing one. I'm just going to bring a couple of cigarette lighters, just because it's so much easier. Now, we talked about things that don't take up a lot of space but are very useful. So fish hooks, fish line, needle and thread, razor blade. This is some fishing tackle, some sinkers and some rubber worms and that sort of thing. I don't have a lot of food here, you'll see. I have a little food back here, but mostly I'm going to try to get food off the land. And most of that's going to be fish. If I go in September when hunting season is open, I do have a bowstring, and I can try to make a bow if I get an archery license and try to shoot small game. Theoretically, I could legally shoot a deer with a bow. These are a couple of items that don't take up a lot of space, but even though they're not very useful, they don't take up a lot of space. Obviously, a transistor radio, if I get bored, I can, you know, listen to the ball game or whatever. This is actually a flash unit for a phone, but it's super bright, and if I can figure out how to turn it on, super bright, and rechargeable battery. So I'll take that as a little flashlight. If you are able to gather food, it's important to be able to cook food. This is a stainless steel stanley cook pot with a lid. These things are very, very handy, and actually this will fit very nicely in there, and when I squeeze real hard, this whole thing will fit into this aluminum cook pot as well. I'll be collecting water on site. Surface water may tend to have bad flavors. I've got some coffee filters. These can be reused. To get debris out of the water, I'll have to boil it to make it safe, and then it may not taste so good, so I've got some Crystal Light to cover up those off flavors. Also in the cooking department, a variety of pieces of aluminum foil will come in very handy for all sorts of cooking. Hose clamps, you wonder, why hose clamps? Well, if I need to join things together, it's a way to do it very, very tightly. If I want to put two sticks together, for example, and I need to get them real tight, I can do that. I have a little salt here. It could be used for preserving things. For example, preserving fish if I need to store it for a few days. And then on the outside of this plastic jar, I have some duct tape. little plastic tube. This would be good for a solar still. Little insect repellent, because there are bugs in the woods in the summer. It doesn't take up much space. All sorts of variety of wire and cordage here, used for stringing up a tarp and that sort of thing. Plastic garbage bags, which can be used in shelter, in storing foods, hanging things off the ground. Very useful. I'm going to bring some nails. I can, hammer pieces of hammer logs together to form a shelter and that sort of thing. Even to make a little bench or a little table. I do have an emergency kit. Whenever I go into the deep woods, I like to bring a whistle. If I'm on my camping trip and I should hurt myself or something, whistle would help get me rescued. This is first aid stuff, little bar of soap, and everything in there from, antacids to Band-Aids and everything in between. Now, cutting tool. Whoops, yes, cutting tools. I do need cutting tools. I have a knife. This is sort of a gimmicky knife. I didn't think much of it at first because there's a flashlight in it, right? But actually I've used it several times to gut deer in the field and that sort of thing, and actually a pretty good knife. I do have a hatchet here. This hatchet is sort of a multi-purpose tool, so you can't, I don't know if you can see this, but down inside is a blade, and I could take that blade off. It's a saw blade, and I can pull this out of here and attach it and then have a saw. Otherwise it's a hatchet, and the other attachment for this then is this shovel blade, which so it's one handle and three different tools: the saw, the shovel, and the hatchet. I will show you if I can with this. I've taken a file to make a sawtooth, a saw on the edge of this shovel blade for cutting through roots and that sort of stuff. Always good to have tools that have more than one purpose. And then here I have a proper saw blade for a bow saw. There's a technique that hopefully I'll get to demonstrate to you, whereby you would just string the saw blade between some pieces of wood that you cut yourself, and are able to make a nice bow saw off of that. We'll need a couple of stout pieces of steel, and I've got some nails attached to that to make that as well. Now for shelter. Big bulky piece of plastic here. I want something that's going to be very sturdy and strong, that'll go over the top of my wigwam. And then some thinner sheets of plastic for a ground cloth or entryway or something. It's a real thin sheet of plastic here, but it doesn't take up much space, and it's very light. That would cover a lot of ground. I also have a couple of space blankets here, obviously to help reflect the heat back onto me when I'm sleeping. Ziploc bags always come in handy, right? And then food. So the only food I'm bringing are these homemade, what would you call them, survival bars or nutrition bars. Come up with a formula. So these bars are about, that's one bar there. It's about that thick. And they're 400 calories, so they're mostly fat, a lot of nuts, a lot of peanut butter, a lot of oil, with some oatmeal and whatnot. In fact, here's what that looks like if you eat it. It's not the most appetizing thing in the world. It's pretty hard, but a lot of calories, and then I added some protein powder. So we've got 10 grams of protein per bar. So those will be good for breakfast or something. Cooking oil, if I'm going to be eating fish, which I would hope to mostly. Cooking oil obviously is like pure calories, and so I can bring that along. And then some good old rice and beans, and have some seasonings here in these tiny little packets, and sure, a Swiss Miss hot cocoa, just because that'll look awful good some misty morning. All right, so that's what goes into the kit so far. I'll let you know if I make any additions or deletions, but meanwhile we've got to see if we can fit it all into this knapsack. And so we'll get the fast forward here thing going, and see if we can pack it all in there. I think it'll fit. So there we go. And I've got a little room to spare here. Don't know what else I should bring. Maybe some candy bars. A beer. Okay. Well, hopefully I'll be back with you in summer. Who knows? Well, maybe we'll get a chance to take this into the wilderness and see how long I can survive with my minimalist pack here.